everyone, and welcome to Coffee with FJ. And as you can see, we sort of had to change our venue today. Unfortunately, I usually like to be outside in the patio area, but they're cutting a tree down next door, so a little too noisy out there. So we're here on the rectory porch, and I'm joined with one of our somewhat newly ordained priests, Father Yui Lee, and with our soon-to-be newly ordained priest, Deacon Sinh Trinh. I'm joined by these two gentlemen today because we're sort of doing a series on not just the church in the Diocese of Springfield, but what is the church like all around the world. Last week, as you remember, we met with Deacon Valentine and Deacon Stanislaus to talk a little bit about the church in Africa. And so I thought it would be great to have some of the other multicultural aspects of our diocese come and join us today. And so Father Yui and Deacon Sinh from Vietnam have enthusiastically joined me today, even though Deacon Sinh looks like he might fall asleep during this interview. Oh, yeah, he's awake now. But listen, gentlemen, thank you for agreeing to be on the show. Thank you for being with me today. So if you could just introduce yourselves, where you're from, part of Vietnam maybe, and what made you decide to come to the U.S.? I mean, maybe it was your parents, maybe it was something else, and why the Diocese of Springfield? So either one of you, go. Father Yui.
So my grandparents came here when in the 90s, early 90s, and so they sponsored my family over. So I came here with my parents and everyone over.
How old were you?
I was 12.
12. Okay.
I was
12.
So we moved to Amherst, and so grew up at the Newman Center, and belonged to the diocese since then.
Okay. So you're sort of Vietnam and Springfield is kind of a dual home.
Yeah, choosing Springfield was not an option.
Well, what about religious community? Still not an option.
Well, I didn't know much about religious community or license at all.
I see.
And so I was at the Newman, so Father Gary just threw me wherever he wanted. And so I ended up being a diocese priest.
Very good. Deacon Sinh?
Yes, I was born in Vietnam, so, and, in 1975 when the communist took over, so my family turned upside down everything. And I finished high school in Vietnam, but I cannot go further study. And I stayed 2 years in my house, tried to help my mom and my grandparents. But after 2 years, I cannot do anything for study or for working. So I tried to escape, and after 5 times, and I succeeded in the Philippines, 1989.
So, and how long were you in the Philippines for?
Oh, and I stayed in the refugee camp in the Philippines 17 years, from 1989 to 2006.
Okay. And so, was your vocation to the priesthood fostered in that camp, or was it always part of you?
Let's say the vocation is come long time after I finished my high school in Vietnam. I think about vocation, but during that time the communists very, very strict, so I cannot find any place to enter vocation for religious life or the diocese. And when I arrived in Philippines, right away, the idea when I become a priest to urging me, and I looking for that. The reason I said because the boat I escaped is sunk in the middle of the sea. So I was rescued by the oil company, so that I think myself this is the second life God give to me.
Yeah.
So I need to do something, return to Him. And so that when I arrived in the camp, I bring that idea right away with the priest in the camp. But he said, son, we cannot do anything here, even go out the camp. But keep that idea and try to work with the church what I can, so that I join with the church group, youth group in the camp, and volunteer to work in the camp. And I don't know how long, but finally I ending 17 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so, to come to the U.S., you have to be sponsored. You were sponsored by your grandparents. How were you sponsored to come over?
I don't have a relatives in this country. So when the government, the U.S. government, offered the last chance to the people stay longer in the Philippines, in the refugee camp, and they can apply to U.S. if they don't have any relatives in another country. So I fit with that program. And one of my friends stayed with me before in the refugee camp. He know that he asked me to put his name in the sponsor. So he the one to sponsor me to come to US.
And so from there, when you came to the US in 2006, is that when you began about more intense priestly discernment? What happens? And from then to now, how did you end up here, Deacon Sinh? All of us want to know, because we all love you so very much. How did we get blessed with you?
When I arrived in Chicago, right away the idea to become a priest is still strong in me, and I looking for right away. And I approached in the Archdiocese of Chicago. I remember I talked with vocation at Archdiocese of Chicago. He answered me, I'm just arrived here, everything is new for me. Even the food I eat in my plate, in the table, is still new for me. So keep that in mind and keep in touch with them 1 year or 2 years. If I still want to become a priest, so we will work out. But I think that it's good, but I keep searching and searching and searching, so that after 6 months I will accept by the religious order. Religious order, and I stay with them 4 years, almost 5 years. And after that, I transferred to the diocese. Yeah. And the reason...
What religious community were you in?
The SVD.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah. The reason why I landing in the Springfield, because I don't have a family in US. So it simply look like I'm freelance or free birth. So I go to the USCCB website, sending the application to many dioceses again. And finally, the Diocese of Springfield the first answer me and give me the chance, so I'm here.
Wow, we are so grateful to have the two of you, especially you, Deacon Sinh.
Thank you, Father.
You're welcome. What is it like? So I spoke with Deacon Valentine and Deacon Stanislaus. They described for me a bit about what the church is like in Africa. And in the U.S., you know, the church in the U.S. is not as exuberant as the church in Africa. The church in Africa is very lively, very, very enthusiastic, and that was the way they described how life is like, really, there. But here it's much more subdued, if you will. What is it like, the church in Vietnam compared to the church in the U.S.? Are there similarities or there differences? I'm sure there are differences, but what would be the main talking points of that?
Well, I think in Vietnam it's more of enculturations, and so because the people in Vietnam, a lot of them are from the communists, and so it's, you know, there's no religion, so it's ancestral worship, right? And so they have this high respect for the dead, and so it's easier for Vietnam to, in a sense, worship in a more praised and more vibrant manner, because they grew up with this ancestral worship, and so with the Catholic Church coming in, it's easier for them to fit into the Catholic Church. You know, there's a lot of aspect in which they transform it, you know, with the idea of being able to pass down the faith. You know, for example, we have the baptismal name, for example. In Vietnam, you don't choose your own baptismal name unless you're a convert.
Right.
You know, if you are a godfather and you are getting a godson, he's getting your baptismal name.
Interesting.
He's getting your saint name.
Interesting.
So
what is yours?
So mine is John, so John the Baptist.
Okay.
Right, and so my nephew, who's I sponsor, is John.
Interesting.
And so my godfather is also John, and so we share this same connections.
So there's a bond.
Yes, it's a bond.
That's neat.
And you know, and with the Vietnamese, you know, praying for the dead, you know, they always do that.
Yeah.
You know, with a little altar at home of, you know, praying for and not worship. You know, so there's, but they also have an altar of Jesus and Mary. So almost in Vietnam, because the religion is getting, it used to get very strict. You know, you don't get to go to college if you know, back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. You don't get to go to college if you are a Catholic. You have to declare that you are non-religious.
Really?
So, you know, that's why Sinh ran away from the country. My grandparents left because they wanted to have a future for their kids. You know, my aunts and uncles, you know, they had to come here to finish their college at a later age. But the church there is different than his because people still have that pain of, in a sense, in persecutions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if we look through the church grow in persecutions.
That's right.
You know, and so here I think we are just a little too relaxed, too free in a sense, and so we, in a sense, having, in a sense, like a silver spoon fed to us. You know, this is like Sinh and I. You know, I have like a golden spoon, and he had to struggle through the priesthood, but I don't have any. You know, I was here. Language was not a problem. Family was not a problem, and so.
So, just tell me a little bit more about what Catholic life was like what was it like under the communist regime? Because we know what communism is, right? We know that communism is in itself its own religion, right? It's the autonomy of the state versus the people, right? So and it poses itself on the people, right? So you have to rely on government for basically everything, which obviously we know doesn't work. But nevertheless, in that it controls you, really. And what I would say that's accurate, it controls you. So how do you practice your faith under that, or can you not? Or is even that control?
When you talk about it, you mentioned the communists. So you should to know that the first thing is the communists do not accept any religion. So that Catholics is not accept either. So that they do not accept any religion, so that they do not accept the faith, and they want to people to not accept. Like Father Yi said, when you apply to go to high further study, accept your family background for the religion, you should to put in non-religion. And now it's go back in the practice. If the people practice at home, it's okay. But the Catholic, we cannot practice at home all the times. Sometimes you go to the church Sunday on any event, and so that we need to ask permission from the government. Now it's less than easy a little bit, but still the big gathering, you need to ask permission from government. Another example that is the seminary just opened 1990. I mean, after 15 years, when the communists took over the country, we don't have seminary. All the seminary, the first were attacked by the government. And later on, they give some permission from the diocese to build another small the seminary to try to land a seat for the vocation. But every diocese only had 2 candidates for every year. Only you only have submit 2. You can submit more, but they approve only 2 candidates for a seminary to enter seminary.
Wow.
2 seminarians for each diocese to enter seminary.
How many dioceses in Vietnam?
So, for example, now we have about 63 dioceses in Vietnam. Yeah.
It's a lot relaxed now than
Right.
in the 90s.
And there's much more vocations happening now in Vietnam.
Yeah, I think each diocese now have a couple hundreds or 500.
So now this leads me to another question then. So we talked about this with Valentine and Stanislaus. The church in Africa is having similar experiences now, where they are, for lack of a better term, just busting at the seams with seminarians and priests, where they're sending their guys everywhere for missionary work. We have a few of our own African missionary priests here in the Diocese of Springfield. Some of the hospital chaplains, Father Donatus, and I think Father Adolf is gone now. But what about in Vietnam now? Now that the communism is not in power now, right? So.
Well, in Vietnam, from what I know, is that they are trying to evangelize to the native Vietnamese. Mm-hmm. So, like, we are not native Vietnamese.
Okay.
You know, it's like how we have the American.
Like, I'm not a Native American.
Yes,
right,
that's
right,
the
right.
Native American. So there's the native Vietnamese, and so, you know, they still live in rural areas and
right.
the mountainside, and so one of their focus now is to go there to evangelize. You know, they have abundance of vocations, but they also have a lot of people.
They also have a lot of mission work to do.
Yes, there's a lot of mission work to do.
Just like we do here.
But they've been building a lot of seminaries, and so that's why, and the government is not restricting them as much like before. Mostly because the older generations, you know, the one from the war is gone, and the newer generation is up, and so they are a little more relaxed in a sense.
Is there growth? Because is there something to be said for growth under persecution?
Yeah, I think that
I'm thinking specifically about the Vietnamese martyrs, right? So 17th century, 18th century, around that time, right?
Yeah.
Or Lydia Lavang, you know, the devotions, the martyrs, like you said earlier, like in Africa, we talked about last week, religion is a part of the soul of the people already. So do you think that plus the persecutions help the growth that you're seeing now in Vietnam?
Yeah, because if you have to worry about your religion, you have to think about it more. You know, and so that's one of our gift is to be able to think and reason. You know, our gift, what we are different from animals, is that we are able to think. And so under persecution, it forces us to choose.
Right. So there's a bit of a leading question to this. What do you think is happening here in the United States? Do you see something similar happening with everything that's happening now, pandemic, the uprisings that we're seeing, a lot of, not to get too political, but a lot of government takeover with a lot of things in order to sustain our lives, so to speak, or maintain, quote unquote, the normality of American life. But we're seeing that even before this was happening, and the pandemic and everything, that the church in the U.S. was persecuted in different ways than in other places. But do you think that you can see something similar happening here now, as you in different ways maybe than in Vietnam? And do you think that there could be growth for the Catholic Church in the U.S. based on that?
Well, yes and no, because in the U.S. we had so many scandals the past 20, 30 years, right? So the past many years, there's so much scandals going on that to be a Catholic is an embarrassment, not a pride. You know, you don't carry Christ saying, you know, I have Christ, I can find peace. You know, it's more, I have Christ, I don't want you to look at me. You know, it's embarrassing to be a Catholic.
So how do we overcome that?
You know, and so, well, it's the same as we always do. We trust in God and we pray for the grace of God so that we can, you know, it's, in a sense, it's a feeling that is overcoming us. And so in Vietnam, it's different because they don't have that aspect of being embarrassed. You know, but in a sense, they have, this is our community. We have survived this together. You know, and so we're going to keep this faith.
So what do you think are some lessons we can learn from the Vietnamese Catholics in the U.S.?
Well, I think for us right now, it's still a struggle for us to pass through this, in a sense, these scandals, right? Until we come together and say, you know, we made mistakes, you know, people make mistakes, you know, but let us come together and survive through this, instead of pointing fingers of saying, you know, why did that happen? Why did this happen? You know, in Vietnam, they don't point fingers of, you were from the north, you were from the south, you know, but they said, you know, you are Catholic, all right, let's come together, you know, and help each other. Because as I remember, my parents, they always tell us stories of how people help each other because they were starving. You know, after the war, everyone was starving, and so people had to share whatever they have. But now, because we are so embarrassed that we don't even share what we feel to each other. You know, we don't talk about our faith to each other at all.
You're right about that.
The three things about Americans is that you cannot talk about politics at the dinner table, not religions, and whatever the third one. But
sometimes sports, depending on your affiliation.
And so, but in other countries, you can't do that.
Yeah.
You know, that you don't have this fear of embarrassment.
We don't have, as Catholics, a united front.
Yes.
What do you think, Deacon Sinh?
I think it's the one thing here, like it's some sense that when you want to evangelize, the most people on the top of the line are in the bottom of the line. So in Vietnam, we can put in the bottom of the line. The bottom here, I will not talk about the economy, but on the sense in general. For example, for the persecution of the church, because the church don't have a voice. The church don't have anything like here. So that the people, in general, when we talk with the freedom of religion, only the word, but we cannot deal with that government. We don't have right, we don't have authority, we don't have anything to raise a voice in the government. So that can help the people more bonding together in the parish or in the diocese, because they know that someone cares for them, someone take care for them, someone can raise their voice, even though their voice will not listen. But in here, because am I wrong? Because a lot of freedom, every people can say, every people can talk. So So that many people have many ideas and sometimes it's not focused. But that is the lie here, is the freedom. But in Vietnam, we cannot do that. So that the role of the priest in the parish is very important. Because you are the leader of the group, the leader of the Catholic people around you in there. So
lots of things are centered around the church in Vietnam.
yes.
Whereas here, we're looking at organizations, institutions, the homeless shelters are here, the food banks are here. If you need this, go there. If you need that, go there. Don't come to me, go over there.
Yeah, but in the reason, because here you have more sources and more freedom. In Vietnam, we don't have that sort, and we don't have freedom. So we need something, we come together, we buy together, and the priest is the head of function to can bring the people together, because they need their voice, they need their help, they need their hand. So that, because if they go by themselves, the government will persecute them.
Well, it's interesting how between Africa and Vietnam, the role of the priest and the role of the community plays such a prominent role in the practice of the faith, whereas here it's much more diminished. What would be your advice, the two of you, we only have a few minutes left, to any young man, Vietnamese or African or not or whatever, discerning a priesthood? What would your advice to be for them? What would it be? Really quick. We got 2 minutes.
I think it's because we cannot compare in the Vietnam and here, but we try to look in the what advanced here and what is capacity we can learn and we can apply here. So here we have more freedom and more to develop our capacity and try to bring people together. Because the more people together, you have a power. Here I do not say the power for rally or for protest, but the power for the voice, even in the prayer. So that we need the prayer, more people prayer, more miracle happen. So that in faith too. So that I think in here, we need to get the people together and work together and share the life together. Yeah.
Amen. Father Yui, last thoughts?
I think for young men, our faith is not applying faith. Our faith is built on reason as well. Faith is just us living to that, believing that what the church taught about Jesus is true and we believe in Him. But for young men, just don't give up.
Amen.
Just don't give up, and just if you are confused, if you want to know something, if you read anything and it confuses you, ask someone.
Yeah.
Don't hold it into yourself and continue learning, because God is knowledge. And so the more we want to know about God, is the more we try and learn about Him.
Well, and we've got a great example in Deacon Sinh of what it's like to not give up. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Coffee with FJ. Next week, we're going to continue this discussion on the diversity of the church of different cultures, and I'll be joined by a priest of ours in this diocese from Poland. So we'll have a discussion about what the church is like in Poland next week. Thank you again for joining us. And as always, may Almighty God bless you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Father.